It's my honor to introduce our keynote speaker for the weekend. If you haven't heard of Father Seraphim Aldea before, you're going to love him. He's a monk working to build the first Orthodox monastery in the Celtic Islands of Scotland in more than a millennium. He has a PhD in modern theology from the University of Durham, and he hosts the Ancient Faith podcast, Through a Monk's Eyes. It's such a blessing to have Father Seraphim here. So if you please join me in welcoming him tonight. Father Seraphim.
I thought love was only true in fairy tales, meant for someone else but not for me.
First, I have to find Mary somewhere because she's supposed to signal and I've got 5 more minutes left. Okay, thank you. As usual, I have nothing prepared because I do strongly believe that if you not prepare, but if you make preparation kind of part of your daily life, then you can be open in the moment to something that you wouldn't really have to offer, and God just gives it to you. Because a very simple reality, it's a very basic reality. I've never met most of you in my life. I have no idea who you are. I have no idea what your worries are, what your hopes and desires and ambitions and fears and all of that. And you haven't met me either, so how on earth am I supposed to prepare in order to deliver something that hopefully is meaningful to you? I can prepare, as I have done years of my life, in an academic sort of way, where you quote things from the Holy Fathers or the Gospel or something, and you dress it up nicely so it fits the theme of that particular conference or retreat or whatever it is. And that does work, but as His Grace was saying, it works somewhere here. And I've spent most of my life in an academic environment, and I've met perhaps the brightest, best educated theologians that are alive today. And with all due respect and love I have for all of those I've met, I don't think I've met a saint yet. But I have spent also years of my life in monasteries in Moldavia. I've been frequently to the Holy Mountain in Russia, in Greece, and I've got a feeling that I've met quite a few of those there, and many of them really could barely read or write. In fact, I don't even have to think of them. I have to think of my grandmother, may God rest her soul, who couldn't read and who couldn't write, and who was definitely a saint. And that really troubled me throughout my whole life, living in the world, so to put it, and being part of the academic world, because it felt like I'm playing a game of chess with very high conceptual ideas. And the purpose of such meetings was really to impress your opponent and hopefully checkmate him or her. And that didn't seem to give me what I wanted when I entered monastic life, which was a very simple, basic thing called salvation. I don't want anything else. I don't have any aspiration, I don't have any sort of ambitions in terms of career or being known, or I couldn't care less. I am here today simply because the monastery that God put in my hand and said, you have to take care of this, that monastery requires me to do this work. I am so removed from any sort of ambition or desire that I genuinely am here simply as an act of obedience. And I've tried my best to pray for a word today, and I will ask you to say a little prayer as you finish your cookie or whatever you're eating right now, that God does give me something, because otherwise the risk is that you will go through this weekend hearing all these bright speakers and this idiot monk, and nothing will really trigger anything meaningful. You'll just hear beautiful words and interesting ideas, and maybe it will just, I don't know, influence you for a day or a week, but that's not what we want. Do you remember those beautiful stories in the lives of the saints where they heard a word or they met a father for maybe 2 minutes of their lives. And that saying and that meeting just changed their lives. When I became a monk and when I made a decision to become a monk, I was not even 19. That's what I wanted. And I'm today 40 and I still want the same thing. Nothing has changed. Deep down, nothing has changed. It's the same thirst to meet someone holy who can change my life, to meet someone at whose feet I can just lie down and he or she can do to me whatever they choose because I recognize in them the act of God. So if we join in prayer, maybe God will give me something. I will begin with something. That's the one thing I had in mind. And from there, may God help me. I will begin with the story of the martyrs from the island of Iona. If you don't know anything about those islands, don't worry. I'm building a monastery there. And before I ended up there, I had no idea they even existed, let alone, their life stories. Iona is this beautiful, tiny little speck of land, one of the 240-something islands that are part of the Hebridean archipelago. And that's where St. Columba and 12 other monks came in 563 from Ireland. Why he got there, it's a different story. Maybe we'll talk about it, Sunday. But they eventually got there, and St. Columba founded this extraordinary monastery that managed to survive throughout most of the first millennium. And it started to go down, the whole monastery there, in the 600s, when the Vikings started to attack them. And towards the end of the 600s, a major attack took place on one of the beaches of Iona. The Vikings came down from Scandinavia, or what we call Scandinavia today, and killed close to 50 of the monks who lived on that island. Now, when you say monk in that context, please don't look at me and imagine this over there. Probably I would not have been good enough for a snack for those men. Those were men built to survive in one of the harshest environments that exist. If you go and visit the island today, you will see that there's a ruined nunnery close by. That was built in the 14th century. And within the nunnery, there is a room maybe twice the size of one of these round tables, which is known as the heated room, the room with heat. Because within that whole nunnery, there was no heat except in that one place. And this is an island in the Atlantic where it rains almost daily, and you've got winds and storms throughout the whole winter. And keep in mind that what I've described to you is the nunnery, so the monastery for women in the 14th century. Can you imagine the monastery for men in the 500s, so a millennium before? They were a very special kind of man in order to survive there. And their faith must have been just like iron. And it's important to keep this in mind, because when those Vikings attacked them on that beach towards the end of the 600s, none of those close to 50 monks who were butchered by the Vikings, none of them lifted up any sort of weapon to protect themselves against their attackers. That kind of man who could have crushed me like a stick chose not to lift up their hands in order to protect their own life or the life of their brothers or their monastery. They chose to be killed rather than to kill. They chose to be the ones oppressed rather than the ones oppressing. They chose to be the ones who were crucified rather than the ones who crucified others. And why did they do that? Because Christ teaches us not to use a sword. Christ teaches us that to kill another human being is to kill your own soul. So what was their choice? Their choice was to either follow Christ or to follow the world. where the world doesn't really mean everybody on the outside. We keep using this word as the world, almost like the incarnation of the evil. But the reality is that the world, or the worldliness most of us encounter in our lives, are our own fallen humanity. If we need to defeat something, if we need to, correct something, it's not outside, it's here, it's within me and within you. And these people, these men of faith of iron, chose to be faithful to the word of God beyond the instinct of survival that must have kicked in because they were human beings. And we go today there, and I do pray one day you will come to see that beach with me, and there is nothing to remember them. Nothing. There is a cross, but the cross is dedicated to people who have died in the First World War. And there used to be a church, but now the church is a private accommodation space. It became somebody's house. They are completely forgotten. Their faith is completely wasted here in this world of ours. But because of their faithfulness to Christ and to his teaching, they are alive in the kingdom. They are forgotten here, but they are remembered in the kingdom. They could be dead and defeated here, but they are alive, and they are the true winners in the world to come. You see, they had a choice. They had the choice to follow Christ, to be faithful, because this is the topic really, to be faithful to Christ or to be faithful to their instinct of survival. And we have the same choices in our lives. Each generation has to face these choices. Don't imagine that we don't, because we do. And our choices really are much more important in a way than the choices that face the generations before us. Think about, His Grace was speaking about us being in community, about neighborliness, or whatever the word is. The example of a neighbor that we are given by Christ is that of someone whom you need to help and take into your home. And think of where we are today as Christians. We are gathered here to have this beautiful conference, and it is a wonderful thing. May God bless it and increase it and multiply it. However, our Christian lives are not about this. You are faithful to Christ when you take a stand against anything that goes against Christ's teaching. You are faithful to Christ when those who build walls against your neighbors are opposed by your voices. You are faithful to Christ when I manage to have the guts to speak when people are drowning in the Mediterranean Sea and the European countries do not receive them. Why don't we receive them? Because God forbid they might invade us, and then maybe an event as nice as this is no longer possible because they'll change our culture and they'll use our resources, and all our beautiful lives might collapse under that. Faith is not for us to keep in our homes. Faith is not for us to keep within our churches. Faith is always manifested on the outside, and faith will never make you popular. Faith will never make you someone loved, popular, or a winner in the eyes of the world. And it's normal, it should be that way. We are supposed to become Christ-like. And look at Christ. Look at that image of him crucified on the cross. Crucified, therefore what? Damned, cursed by the very law that he passed. Naked in front of his people. Killed by the people for whom he came in order to save. That's what we should become like. Not nicely dressed, with a nice monastic hat in my monastery, doing all my services nicely. That's good. But that's just a basic line that's supposed to feed something in me. And it's supposed to feed in me the strength and the madness to address the world, to fight the world, but not in a way that destructs the world, but in a way that saves the world. We are supposed to fight the world the way Christ fought the world, not to destroy it, but for the life and the salvation of the world. Why isn't there a movement in this church of ours to protect these people? Why isn't there a movement in this church of ours to truly speak about what's happening with nature, with our environment, with this disaster that is going on around us? And we all know about it, and we all agree that something needs to be done, but we don't quite know what. And we really don't care because we believe that things can be done somewhere else, hopefully by someone else, not me, not here, not in my household, not in my city. Your children, I won't have any, I'm a monk, but your children will live in a world that has already no tigers, no lions, no elephants. There are so many animals that we have killed to the point of extinction. And this does not include all the nasty little, insects and microorganisms that we don't even see. You may think it's not important, but it is essential, because as we kill the world around us, we kill ourselves. As we take this just poisonous approach to the world around us, the same approach we take towards ourselves. As we destroy the diversity of the world we live in, we forget how beautifully diverse we are. I've got 5 minutes to go, so I'm not going to be kind anymore. If you want your children to live in a beautiful world, you are the generation that needs to get something done. This is not something that should happen in 10 years or in 50 years. This is your responsibility and mine. I include myself in that, although I'm 2 days over 40. We need to get things done, not because it fits within a political stand or some sort of philosophy of modern, contemporary life, but because Christ created this world, and he died for its life and for its salvation. And if we want to become Christ-like, then we should be crucified as we fight for the salvation and the life of this world. Please understand, this is no longer a theoretical problem. This is something that affects the world. If you think that those poor migrants that asked for asylum in the United States coming from the South are going to still kindly, politely, legally ask for a right to be here in 20 years, you are fools. Forgive me. And so are we Europeans if we believe that all those nice migrants coming from Africa will still be nice and kind in 10 or 20 years, when the disaster we have created in this world will kick in fully, when the drought and the starvation and the poverty and the violence that come from that will kick in those parts of the world, when hundreds of millions of people will fight for survival, the law means nothing. And what are we going to do then? Are we going to wait for all of them, just killing all of them with what, poisonous gas or guns? As we come and attack us and kill us, as they should, as probably I would, in order to save their children and their children's children. You are the generation that needs to look at this honestly, without any sort of, metaphorical understanding, and you are the generation that needs to find a solution, because these things are happening now. And as the temperature increases and our destruction of God's creation advances, things are not going to be pretty. Don't be afraid. I remember in 2016, and I'll finish after I say this. I remember in 2016, I recorded 2 podcasts because I happened to be in Paris when the deadly attack happened, when the terrorist attack happened in Paris. And I recorded 2 podcasts about the madness of justifying gun ownership in the name of some sort of idiotic, devilish freedom, if that kills tens of thousands of people every year. And I received so many negative comments that, to my shame, for 2.5 years, I stopped recording everything, because I thought, I can't face this, and maybe I'm wrong to do this. we no longer have the comfort of choosing whether or not we speak about these things. You have to speak about them. You have to do something about them. Otherwise, you and I are the murderers of the next generations. In the name of love, you need to do something. And when I say love, I mean God. You need to get past your political beliefs. You need to get past your family's beliefs. You need to just open your eyes, look at the reality, and do something now if you want to be faithful to the one who died on a cross for the life and for the salvation of the world. Forgive me. I would have been much kinder and I would have been much gentler had I had 45 minutes instead of 20. And thank you for inviting me. I'm so out of place here. It's always a miracle to me that anybody even thinks to invite this creature from an island in such a wonderful place. May God bless you and thank you, Your Grace, for everything. Forgive me.
All right, and now we will go across to the other ballroom and take your things with you, and we'll head it there. Thank you.